Jim, a question for the late night drive-thru from Eric in White House, Tennessee. My question is about NWA presidents. I've heard Ric Flair say that he believes Bob Geigel was the worst NWA president ever. Do you agree or disagree? And who do you think was the best and worst NWA presidents? And also, what exactly were the responsibilities of the NWA president?
Well, first of all, when I'm trying to think of, Sam Muchnick was the president of the NWA for much of the time from when it was founded to, when he retired and things went south. Fritz von Erich was president a couple of times. Jim Barnett was Barnett ever president?
No.
one time? He wasn't even president one time for 1 year.
I think he was treasurer, maybe.
Yeah, he was the treasurer because he'd booked the champion is what it was.
Eddie Graham was president.
Well, obviously Eddie Graham. So if you're ranking on Sam Muchnick, Eddie Graham, and even Fritz von Erich, now Bob Geigel pretty much had to be the worst because I can't think of another one.
Well, plus the NWA wasn't in 1986 what it had been in 1976.
Well, yeah. And the duties, Sam Muchnick, when he was president, Eddie Graham during his period of time, and even Fritz, when he was president, basically they would, shepherd, preside over the annual meeting. They would try to intervene in promotional disputes amongst member promoters. They would, Barnett for a long time is the one who booked the NWA champion and made sure that the percentages were paid and taken in and et cetera. And basically just at that time, except for mitigating promotional disputes, taking care of the champion and the champion's business and making sure everybody in the membership was happy. I don't know if there were a ton of other details I'm sure there were, but for the sake of this guy's interest, that was the main wrestling related duties, but you were also running your own territory, whoever it was. So they had their hands full. But then it became, by the time you said Bob Geigel was president, just because he was one of the last few promoters, he still had a piece of the Central States, Kansas City territory, and at the same time, was an ex-wrestler and could tape some statements when they needed to. But it was really an on-camera figurehead role at that point because Crockett was booking the champion because it was fucking Flair or whoever Crockett wanted it to be, and nobody else really had any say in anything.
Do you think the Georgia Wrestling War is the best example of the NWA flexing its muscle?
No, because it took them 1.5 years to win it. The best example would be one of those aborted, trips to California for somebody when they tried to run against Mike LaBelle when he was actually strong, or maybe even Shire when he was strong, or Bruiser and Sheik maybe. Even though that took a while also. But the NWA really got behind Sheik from 72 to 74. There were a lot of major NWA stars going to the Cobo in Detroit on a regular basis. And if Bruiser hadn't, had part of Chicago and been able to get AW8 and Midwest talent and stuff like that, he wouldn't have lasted as long as he did. The NWA really kind of fucking flopped until they brought Barnett back in the Georgia War, because remember, since Ray Gunkel had been the booker and all the boys loved Ray Gunkel and all the boys were really not loyal to the office, the rest of the office, when the Georgia territory, when Ann Gunkel started her own company, all of the established NWA office guys went with her. And that's why they were able to fight for so long, because finally they started starving her out when she couldn't get any new talent, and those guys got stale and had to move on. But for a while, she looked like the established office. Usually the NWA would be the establishment side, and the Outlaws would be the ones that really needed bigger talent or bigger guns, because not only would the NWA office have the guys that were over in that territory, but they could bring in the champion and the big names from Florida and et cetera. And remember, when Jarrett split off from Nick Goulas, the NWA didn't help Nick at all. And poor Nick had been the one guy. He started every sentence with the only official NWA sanctioned wrestling. He had the logo everywhere. He had it on his envelopes, his business cards, the TV desk for interviews, the TV set. He said NWA constantly, and they didn't help him a bit, except for the Sheik. When when Jarrett split off, because it was another situation where Nick had made so many enemies. And Jarrett splits off, takes every bit of the talent, and the NWA just sat back and let nature take its course. And 6 weeks later, when Jerry Jarrett's won the war, his first show back in the Coliseum, and with Nick having been run out of Memphis, had Eddie Graham, the NWA world champion, Jack Briscoe, and Dusty Rhodes on it.
Well, that's really what did it for him. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he had the relationship with Eddie Graham, which gave him power within the NWA, and he also was able to make the deal. Everyone just thinks Jerry Jarrett went off on his own and eventually became partners with Lawler. He made the deal with Buddy Fuller, the son of Roy Welch, who had been Nick's longtime partner and by that point had passed away, to go with him, and he had the NWA power of Buddy Fuller, who had been a partner in Florida, a partner in Georgia.
Yeah.
He had a piece of everything at one point, and Nick just didn't have friends. I mean, what promoters like Nick?
The Sheik.
Other than the Sheik, did Nick have any allies in the NWA?
The Sheik.
Exactly. And in terms of Georgia, it's interesting because they brought in as many big stars as they could to go against Ann Gunkel. Gordon Soley. That's when Gordon Soley started coming up from Florida to do the TV show. That's when Bill Watts came in and became the booker. They did everything they could to battle back, but it was really the decision from Jim Barnett to leave Australia and buy into that office that changed everything. That's what ended it.